Jude and the Zombies, Part 5. A broken window breaks the silence. For a long time after that, I thought I was totally alone, the only normal person left not bent on killing every undead that moved. If I have to live one more day alone, I'll kill myself, I muttered frequently, knowing it wasn't true. My voice was starting to sound strange to me. I talked out loud all the time, to the cat, to my CDs, to the characters in my books. I was going insane. Almost 1 year after I heard the first announcement on the radio, I heard a banging on the door. It was at the end of August, early in the morning, around 4:30 a.m., while it was still dark. Again, I thought, finally, they've realized I'm not dead and they've come to attack me. I got out of bed. I almost felt elated. I walked to the door and opened it. There was a dirty, rumpled boy there. I waited for his mania. I expected him to jump and bite my throat out. He came inside quickly. There were 10 zombies running toward the door, but they stopped when they saw me. They moved forward and backward several times before making a frustrated groan and running away.
"Why didn't you close the door?"
The boy screamed at me. Wait, you're not turned? I asked.
"Close the door!"
He screamed at the top of his lungs and kept screaming. He fell into a low crouch, making himself very small, but his screaming was still loud and piercing. It was so refreshing to hear that noise, I froze a moment. Another person, screaming or not, was not what I expected. Slowly, I closed the door. He stopped screaming and looked up when the door clicked closed. "Lock it," he whispered. "There's no reason to. They leave me alone," I said. The boy snorted. He looked angry.
"Lock it."
His voice cracked as he said it. It was that small crack in his voice that moved me. "All right," I said. I slid the deadbolt into place. He seemed to relax a bit. We stood in the hallway and stared at each other for a bit, him in his crouch, his arms dangling over his knees, me with my arms crossed. I finally broke the silence. "What's your name?" I asked.
"What's your name?"
he asked. I squinted at him. He lowered his eyes. "What's your deal?" I asked. "My name's Jude," he said. I waited for him to say more. "How are you still alive?" I asked.
"I can run and I can hide," he answered. "What's your deal? How are you still alive?"
"I don't know. They leave me alone," I said. He squinted this time and snorted again. "Why didn't you just turn the knob? It was unlocked," I said.
"I tried the back door first, but it was locked, so I came around front. A bunch of the zombies saw me and started to come after me. I was freaking out a little," he said, as if I was an idiot.
I nodded. I don't know why I always kept the back door locked and not the front. "Are you hungry?" I asked.
"Yes. I haven't eaten for a while," he said.
"How long is a while?" I asked. He looked angry again.
"I don't know. I lost track of time," he snapped.
I watched him for a second. "Come on," I said, and led him to the kitchen. He glanced around nervously as he ate the spaghetti I made for him. He was still hungry, so I gave him 3 granola bars. "Don't overdo it. You're going to make yourself sick," I said.
"You'll never know when you'll get to eat again," he said.
I felt terrible for this boy. I wondered how long he'd been alone. "You don't have to worry about that anymore. You can stay here," I said. I didn't know why I invited him to stay with me. I had no idea who he was aside from his name, and I wasn't a kid person at all. Kids actually sort of bothered me, but after being alone for almost a year, I think I was getting desperate. "I don't know. I gotta keep moving," he said. He gulped at the water I'd given him. "Why? You'll be safe here," I said. He thought for a few minutes, then didn't say anything. I sighed. "Do you want a shower or something?" I asked.
"Why?"
he asked. "You're filthy. You stink." I paused. Honestly, I can't understand how you ate. Can't you smell yourself?
Not really. I guess I'm used to it. He shrugged. But I'll take a bath if you got any water.
I do have water occasionally, I said. I just need to go outside and flick on the generator.
Outside? That's a shit idea, Jude said.
Excuse me. Do you want a hot bath or not? I told you they leave me alone. I paused. How old are you?
I'm 10.
Then maybe you shouldn't use such shit language. We stared at each other for a moment. Get to the bathroom and take a bath. I'll go turn on the generator. It'll only take a second. I stood up and took his plate to the sink. He remained seated. What? I asked. He wouldn't stop staring at me. I'm scared, he said. Of what? I asked. He finally stopped staring at me and looked down at his grimy hands on the lace tablecloth. I sighed. What are we going to do then? I asked. He shrugged. I could sit outside the door, I said. I guess. I don't know. He was embarrassed. His face was flaming red. I set the plate in the sink and went back to the table. I've been by myself for a long time. All right. I sat down across from him. We'll run the bath, pull the shower curtain, and I'll sit on the counter. I'll bring a book, I said. He finally nodded, but didn't look me in the face. Jude followed me as I left the kitchen and went down the hall. I got him a towel and washcloth, put them on the counter in the bathroom, then put a book on top of them. We went into the bedroom and opened Robert's dresser. I guess you could wear a t-shirt and maybe some boxer shorts until we get your own clothes cleaned, I said. Jude nodded silently. Okay then, pick something out. He pulled out a pair of dark striped shorts and an old company t-shirt. After he had picked out clothes, we went to the bathroom. I turned the knobs. A weak, icy stream flowed out. All right, I'll go turn on the generator, I said. I won't go out there, he said. Then wait in here. Then wait in here. I'll be right back. I started out the bathroom door. I heard it slam and lock behind me. I rolled my eyes, trying to remember they didn't leave him alone. I went out the front door. For Jude's sake, I grabbed the key that hung next to the door and locked it. I tucked the key in my pocket and walked the short distance to my carport where I had my power supply rigged up. It didn't take long, only a few seconds to get the thing going. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. I turned around and ran to the front door. It was still closed, but the window next to it was broken and there was a clotted, bloody trail leading to the bathroom. I could hear Jude screaming and sobbing. I ran to the front door and unlocked it. A zombie was pounding on the bathroom door. Get out of here! I shouted. It turned to me. He had the same manic expression of attack that disappeared when I got closer. I only had to take 2 steps before he staggered to the front door, grunting and moaning. Once he was out the door, I shut it and locked it. Jude, open the door, I said as calmly as I could. My voice was shaking. They'd never come inside before. He was still sobbing, and I heard no movement towards the door. Come on, Jude, they're gone. It's just me. I heard nothing. I have a key to this door, I said. I heard no response, so I found the key in the linen closet and put it in the lock. I walked in. The shower curtain was drawn. The room was steamy from the hot water. I pulled the shower curtain away and found Jude sitting fully clothed in a filling bathtub. He gave a feeble yell as I pulled the curtain and fell into a new fit of sobs. He was crouched in the corner of the tub by the spout. It's just me, I said. He looked at me and then flung himself at me, his thin arms wrapped around my neck. I fell backward but managed to catch myself with one hand, the other wrapped around his bony back. His clothes dripped on me and he smelled like a foul, wet dog, but I couldn't let go. Don't you ever leave me alone again, he sobbed in my ear. I settled into a sitting position and wrapped him fully with both arms. I won't, I said. It took some convincing to get him to bathe after that. I told him that after getting his clothes wet, he smelled worse. He finally stepped behind the curtain, peeled off his wet clothes. His thin little boy arm poked out the side, letting his clothes fall with a splat next to the bath mat. He held out his hand for the washcloth.
I handed it to him. "There should be soap and shampoo in there," I said. "I see it." His voice sounded weak and tired. The water was probably too hot. The bathroom was steamy and the pages of my book were wrinkling, but Jude had insisted on hot water only. He'd had enough of being cold, is what he said. I could hear him making noise as he washed. When I'd read through 5 chapters, I wondered what he was doing. "Are you almost done, Jude?" I asked. "I'm done. I've just been sitting." His voice was hazy with sleepiness. "You sound tired," I said. "Duh," he mumbled. I rolled my eyes and closed my book. "Well, get out, dry off, and you can go to sleep," I said. His skinny arm stuck out again for his towel. I handed it to him. "It's a pretty big towel," I said. "That's okay," he said. I heard the tub start to drain, and whooshing noises that could only be a towel on skin. He pushed the curtain aside. He stood, his dark hair every which way, skin red from the blazing water, and the towel clutched around his whole body. I glanced at the water still draining out of the tub. It was dark and grimy. "Help me," he said. I returned my eyes to him. "What?" I asked. "Hold up this towel so I can put on the clothes," he said. "Okay." I set my book on the counter. I turned my eyes to the far corner of the bathroom behind me. "Don't look," he said. "I'm not," I said. "Okay." The t-shirt hung just above his knees. The dark underwear showed through the white t-shirt. "Let's get your clothes washed, and then you can go to sleep," I said. We gathered his dripping clothes in his towel and went to the utility room. I started the washer. The water was still working. I wondered if the generator had enough fuel to finish his clothes. I put my clothes in too, so I wouldn't be wasting water and power on such a tiny load. I dumped a good-sized scoop of detergent into the washer and then paused. "You're not allergic to fabric softener or anything, right?" I asked. He looked puzzled for a second. "I don't think so," he said. I shrugged. "I guess we'll find out." I led him back to the bathroom and handed him a comb. As he ran it through his hair, there was a scratching at the door. The comb dropped from his hand and his whole body went rigid. "What's that?" he asked. "It's probably the cat," I said. I went to the front door. Jude followed behind. I opened the door and the cat strolled in. For once, the front yard was free of any zombies. Jude relaxed a little. "I didn't know you had a cat," he said. I nodded. I turned him back to the bathroom and he finished with his hair. His eyes were drooping by the time he was finished. "Come on," I said. I led him back to the bedroom where he fell into the large king-sized bed and was instantly asleep. I pulled the blankets around him and settled on the other side. I opened my book. The pages were still wrinkled under my fingers. Jude slept for a long time. His breathing was heavy and loud, so I couldn't sleep. It had been almost a year since I'd shared a bed with another person, and Jude seemed particularly loud. Every noise he uttered made me look in his direction. To pass the time, I finished my book. I thought about turning off the light so as not to bother the kid, but he was dead asleep anyway. I sat cross-legged and examined him instead. He had mouse brown hair, that clear skin of a 10-year-old, although tanned and bruised in places. He had a smallish nose and was thin. I tried to guess the color of his eyes, but I couldn't remember for the life of me. I guessed brown to match his hair. It had been light outside when we went to bed, and now the sun was fully up. It was well past early morning now. I wanted to get up and at least use the bathroom. After making sure Jude wouldn't wake up, I crept out of the room and stood with my back to the wall across the hall. I heard a quiet scratching, then went back into the room and pulled the shade away. One zombie was trying to pry the window open, but when it saw me so close, it stumbled back and crawled away. So I couldn't leave him alone for 1 second. I just put my back to the wall when the scratching started. I wondered if moving Jude would wake him up. I slid my arms under his neck and knees. He moaned a little but didn't open his eyes. I took him to the bathroom, dragging a blanket that was stuck between his bony knees and my arm, and set him as softly as possible in the tub. I pulled the curtain. Afterward, I put him back in bed and selected a book I'd already read through 5 times. I had to pick that one, though. It was the only one close by. The kid slept for 2 days. He woke up a couple of times to use the bathroom, but besides that, he just slept. He wouldn't wake up when I would carry him from room to room. When working in the kitchen, I would set him on the table with a pillow and eat standing at the counter so I wouldn't bother him. He barely stirred. I thought maybe he was going to sleep forever. Finally, after 2 days of deep sleep, he woke up with a start. We were in the living room. He was stretched out on the couch, and I was in the recliner reading another book I'd read already. I'd run out of new books to read a few weeks ago. I kept meaning to get more, but then Jude arrived and went to sleep. I'd read all the books in our house, including all the hobby and business books that belonged to Robert. I could now successfully open an ethically run business in the wilderness selling hand-woven baskets and knit suits, but alas, I had no one to sell to. Jude sat bolt upright. "Why am I here?" he asked, looking around frantically. "I brought you out here," I said. He jumped again and turned to look at me. "I forgot about you," he said. "Oh," I said. "Yeah, I've woken up in some really weird places." He paused. "Oh?" He said. "I thought I fell asleep on your bed." He yawned widely. "You did, but I couldn't sit in my bedroom the whole time, so I moved you around." I closed my book and set it on the small bookshelf next to me. "How long did I sleep?" he asked. "About 2 days," I said. He looked shocked. His mouth actually hung open. "That's the longest I've slept in a while," he said. "Why's that?" I asked. "It's not usually safe. You sleep, you don't know when they'll come get you." He flung off his blanket. "You must feel safe here," I said. I tended to say whatever I was thinking out loud. I suppose it came from being alone so long. "I guess," he said. The cat jumped in through the broken window. Jude jumped at the sound of her bell. "Since you're awake now, we can fix that window," I said. "After you eat something, I'm sure you're hungry." Jude shrugged, but I could see the urgency in his eyes. He followed me to the kitchen and watched me make him a sandwich. "So how are we going to fix the window? You got extra glass for it or something?" he asked. "I don't, but we can go to the hardware store down the road," I said as I smeared some grape jelly over peanut butter. "What? You mean leave?" he asked. "They'll be out there." "Of course they will, but they leave me alone," I said for what felt like the 100th time. "I know, but..." He paused. "Even when you go out to their territory?" he asked. I snorted. "Jude, they don't have territory. They just wander around. It's not the house that scares them, it's me. So wherever I am, they don't go near me," I said. "Why?" he asked. I cut his sandwich in half, making 2 triangles. "I don't know," I said. At that time, it was actually true. I didn't know why. He nodded and started to eat his sandwich. We left after he finished. I had an ache in my head, but tried to ignore it as I followed my well-used path to the hardware store. "How are all these cars moved out of the way?" Jude asked. "I moved them. It wasn't that hard," I said. "Wow." His nose was pressed against the window. I parked on the sidewalk right next to the exit doors. Jude didn't get out of the truck until I walked around to the passenger side. Then he flung the door open and stood so close to me he might as well have had his arms around my waist. "Come on," I said, nudging him a little. We walked in and began looking for glass that wasn't broken or that might be broken to the right size at least, but we couldn't find any, at least not out front. "Let's check the back," I said. Jude stopped and grabbed my arm. I turned to face him. "They're going to be back there," he said. "I'm sure they will be," I said. I'd been back there a few times and had seen 3 or 4. "I don't want to go back there," Jude said. His eyes were wide and shiny. I wasn't sure if I could stand it if he started crying. "They won't hurt you. You're with me." "Maybe they'll try and separate us. What if something happens?" Jude's eyes glazed, and I could see big tears balanced on the rim of his eyes. I crouched down to look him in the face. "Jude, It will be fine. They're not smart. They won't separate us. I paused. He shook his head. But if you're afraid, we can stay out here. We'll get some plexiglass. How about that? I asked. I wondered why I didn't just force him to come back with me. I usually didn't care about making people cry, let alone little kids. They cried all the time anyway, right? But seeing his face like that, plexiglass would have to do until Jude gained a bit of confidence around them and me. Yeah, plexiglass would work too, he mumbled. He rubbed nonchalantly at his eyes. All right, let's go get some, I said. He walked close to me again, almost underfoot, as we made our way around the huge store and found the plexiglass. It'll be easier anyway, he said as we climbed back in the truck with our supplies. I guess it will, I said. We made our way home. The window was fixed in about an hour and a half since I'd never done it before, and Jude kept trying to help. Even at 10, he was such a man, trying to do things his way and disregarding the instructions I'd gotten out of a library book. You can't trust those anyway, they're probably so old, Jude said. I looked at him funny. What do you mean they're old? The house is old too, I said. Yeah, but how long has that book been around? He said. How long have windows been around? I asked. He just looked at me.